From Heartbreak to Healing, a husband's journey of self-worth after discovering his wife's affair. James leaned back in his office chair, staring at the photo on his desk, a candid picture of him and Emma on their anniversary trip to Italy. In the photo, Emma's smile was radiant, her arms wrapped around him like she couldn't bear to let go. Perfect, people always said about them. What a perfect couple! But perfection was a fragile illusion, and James was about to see how easily it could shatter. It was a Wednesday when James decided to surprise Emma. He had closed a major deal at work and wanted to celebrate with a quiet dinner at home. As he walked through the door, the faint aroma of her vanilla-scented candle greeted him. Her phone sat on the kitchen counter, buzzing incessantly. Buzz. Buzz. Chris, last night was amazing. Can't wait to see you again. The words stared back at him, each one a dagger in his chest. His hands felt cold as he scrolled further. The messages were explicit: photos, promises of stolen weekends, and confessions of love. James's world came crashing down in that moment, but instead of exploding in anger, he felt a strange calmness settle over him. James didn't confront Emma that night. Instead, he cooked the dinner he had planned, masking his emotions behind a practiced smile. Emma came home later than usual, a faint whiff of cologne clinging to her scarf, one that wasn't his. "Hey, honey," she said, kissing his cheek as if nothing was wrong. "Long day?" James asked, his tone betraying none of the storm brewing inside him. "Exhausting," she replied, avoiding eye contact. James clenched his fists under the table but kept his demeanor calm. He realized he didn't need a confrontation. He didn't want to beg for answers or forgiveness. What he wanted was clarity, and the space to rediscover who he was. The next morning, James woke up early and hit the gym for the first time in years. Each press of the weights, each step on the treadmill, felt like shedding layers of pain. By the end of the week, he had signed up for a painting class at a local studio, something he had always loved but had abandoned for Emma's sake. Days turned into weeks, and James's routine became a quiet rebellion. He stopped asking Emma about her late nights, stopped planning weekend getaways to rekindle the spark. Instead, he poured his energy into himself. At work, his colleagues noticed the change. "James, you look incredible," his coworker Lisa said one day. "New diet or something?" James smiled. "Something like that." At home, Emma began to feel the shift. He no longer waited up for her. He no longer lingered during their conversations. If she noticed his growing confidence, the way he walked with his shoulders back and his chin high, she didn't mention it, but she noticed. One evening, James came home later than usual. Emma was in the living room, scrolling through her phone. "You're home late," she said, her tone tinged with irritation. "Had a meeting with a gallery owner," James replied, setting down his bag. "A gallery owner?" she asked, frowning. "I've been painting again," James said casually. "Turns out, people like my work." Emma stared at him, a flicker of something, jealousy, unease, crossing her face. "That's great," she said, forcing a smile. That night, Emma couldn't sleep. James had always been hers, hadn't he? He had always been predictable, stable, devoted. But now, he was slipping away, and she didn't know how to stop it. The final blow came 3 months later. James had organized a charity gala for his firm, inviting friends, clients, and local artists. Emma arrived fashionably late, expecting to find James waiting for her. Instead, she found him in deep conversation with a stunning woman, Natalie, a gallery owner who had been showcasing his paintings. The woman's laughter rang out as she lightly touched James's arm. Emma's heart sank. Later that night, when they were finally alone, Emma couldn't hold back. "Who was that woman?" she demanded. James raised an eyebrow. "Natalie? She's a gallery owner. Why?" "She seemed close to you," Emma said, her voice wavering. James sighed, his calm demeanor unshaken. "Emma, I think we need to talk." He pulled a letter from his pocket and handed it to her. "I wrote this months ago when I found out about you and Chris." Emma's eyes widened, her hands trembling as she opened the letter. "Dear Emma, I found the messages. I know about Chris. but instead of hating you, I decided to focus on myself. You see, I realized that your betrayal wasn't just about you, it was about the fact that I had stopped valuing myself. I'm not angry anymore. I'm just done. Tears streamed down Emma's face as she looked up at him. James, I'm sorry. I made a mistake. Please, we can fix this. But James shook his head. I've already fixed the... His art continued to thrive, with galleries across the city vying to showcase his work. Natalie remained a constant presence in his life, not just as a business partner, but as a friend and confidant. Slowly, their connection deepened into something more. One evening, as they walked along the river, Natalie turned to him and said, "You're the most resilient person I've ever met, James. You turned something so painful into something so beautiful." James smiled, his hand brushing against hers. "It's funny. For the longest time, I thought my life was over. But now I realize it was just beginning." They paused at the riverbank, the city lights reflecting on the water. For the first time in years, James felt truly free, free from betrayal, free from bitterness, free to love again. Closing reflection. The story ends with James standing in his studio, painting a canvas filled with bold, radiant colors. The painting, titled Renewal, depicted a phoenix rising from ashes, its wings ablaze with golden light. Sometimes life's greatest heartbreaks are the seeds of our greatest transformations. It's not the pain that defines us, but how we rise from it. And in rising, we find not just strength, but the freedom to live fully, authentically, and unapologetically. His art continued to thrive, with galleries across the city vying to showcase his work. Natalie remained a constant presence in his life, not just as a business partner, but as a friend and confidant. Slowly, their connection deepened into something more. One evening, as they walked along the river, Natalie turned to him and said, "You're the most resilient person I've ever met, James. You turned something so painful into something so beautiful." James smiled, his hand brushing against hers. "It's funny. For the longest time, I thought my life was over. But now I realize it was just beginning." They paused at the riverbank, the city lights reflecting on the water. For the first time in years, James felt truly free, free from betrayal, free from bitterness, free to love again. Closing reflection. The story ends with James standing in his studio, painting a canvas filled with bold, radiant colors. The painting, titled Renewal, depicted a phoenix rising from ashes, its wings ablaze with golden light. Sometimes life's greatest heartbreaks are the seeds of our greatest transformations. It's not the pain that defines us, but how we rise from it. And in rising, we find not just strength, but the freedom to live fully, authentically, and unapologetically.
Ex-wife cheated, got an STD, and now she's desperate for help after I became rich and successful. You've emerged victorious while I've suffered defeat. You walk away with property, money, and an upgraded partner. The hotel room is yours tonight, along with the arrangements I've made. Please don't return the gift. It would only remind you of your deceit. I'm driving home and have no desire to see you, him, or your associates again. Let me know when your team will collect your belongings. Anything unnecessary will be packed away, symbolizing the mess of our marriage. To quote my father in the Air Force, "Yay for me and screw you. I'm done serving you. Enjoy your journey. Your acting skills have earned it." 10 years later on a Wednesday morning, I awoke to banging. Rubbing sleep from my eyes, I checked the clock. 8:15 a.m. The noise persisted now at my front door. Who would knock at this hour? I slipped into my robe and slippers, heading downstairs where the knocking grew louder. Peering through the peephole, I saw a disheveled woman. Opening the door, prepared to scold her, I recognized her, older, thinner, her once vibrant hair now tinged with gray. She smelled, her dress worn. She resembled homeless Daisy, who often lurked in the streets or underpasses. In disbelief, I questioned the woman who had once been my wife. "Yes, Mike, it's me. Can I come inside?" she pleaded desperately. "By the way, that's me, Mike Carpenter." "No," I replied, slamming the door in her face. Just then, another knock echoed, accompanied by her sobs. "Please, Mike, I'm begging you, open the door." I flung the door open to prevent further pounding, but remained in the doorway to block her entry. The neighbors already viewed me as peculiar. I didn't want to attract more attention by making a scene on the doorstep. What do you want? I made it clear 10 years ago that I never want to see you again. Never. What part of that didn't you understand? And why are you here? I thought you and Dr. Wonderful were living in Milwaukee. Regaining composure, Daisy wiped her tears and cast me the most longing glance I'd ever witnessed. Can I come in? I'm hungry, tired, and need to use the restroom. Please, I'll explain later, she implored, her feet shifting uneasily. With my experience as a teacher, I recognized the telltale signs of imminent urgency. I didn't want her relieving herself on my porch, so I reluctantly swung the door open, gesturing her inside with a silent invitation. You remember where the bathroom is? I scolded, a reminder that we once shared this home. Hurry up. Thanks, Daisy said, entering. She dropped her suitcase and dashed to the downstairs bathroom. I closed the door, went upstairs for a quick bathroom break, and returned downstairs, finding her still in the bathroom. I went to the kitchen, fired up my Keurig, and brewed coffee. By then, Daisy had returned. Can I have a cup? She pleaded. I paused. Torn between anger and restraint. I couldn't slap a woman, and I didn't want trouble. Yeah, I'm not heartless, I replied, but I'm not your servant either. So I relented, partly out of curiosity. I don't have fancy stuff, I said, offering milk and sugar. Black's fine, Daisy said gratefully. I handed her the cup, watching her trembling hands. Why are you here? I asked. I've got nowhere else to go, she finally admitted. I used up my last dime on cab fare. What happened to your beloved Dr. Bruce? I quipped sarcastically. Dr. Bruce? It fell apart, she stuttered, avoiding my gaze. If my sarcasm had been any sharper, you could have sliced tile with it. I noticed her flinch. After the divorce, we tied the knot, but things soured when Bruce faced a massive medical malpractice lawsuit. Both of us lost our jobs and medical licenses, and we ended up losing everything. Bruce became abusive, blaming me for our situation. One day I caught him cheating, Daisy tearfully recounted. So he got a taste of his own medicine, I remarked wryly, remembering our own past drama. But karma's a kicker, not fun. Daisy whimpered. Just like it wasn't funny when you publicly tore me apart on our anniversary. I reminded her. Do you realize it's the 10th anniversary of that night? No, I didn't know, Daisy murmured. Did you report him to the cops? I asked, showing some compassion. No, too scared. But I did divorce him. Unfortunately, I was left with next to nothing after the split, Daisy explained. I haven't eaten in 2 days. What's your play here? I questioned. Sympathy? You might find it in the dictionary between crap and chiropractor. I despise you. I loathe you as intensely as I once adored you, I snarled. Now that your world's crumbling, you come crawling back to me. Where are your parents and friends now? They've all abandoned me, Daisy sobbed. No surprises there, I scoffed bitterly. Did you and the idiot have kids? No, never did. Turns out Bruce is infertile. For some reason he blames me for that too, she spat bitterly. At least the gene pool's safe from you two, I remarked wryly. Guess something good came from that mess. She wrinkled her nose at me. What happened to you, Mike? You used to be so caring, so kind. Anger morphed into fury and I squeezed my eyes shut. You want to know what happened? Look in the mirror. You happened. Thanks to you, I'm incapable of love and trust. The nice guy finished last, I growled. But I thought you'd move on, find someone else, Daisy wheezed wide-eyed. Get real. After what you did, you never once hinted I was just a fallback for you. I thought we had something solid, but you lied. 13 damn years, 10 as husband and wife. Do you think I can trust anyone after that? I took a deep breath. And how many women do you think would want damaged goods? Not that there was a line, I muttered to myself. Still, not a single one came along. So, are you surprised I've turned into a recluse after a decade of licking my wounds? I suppose not, Daisy admitted sheepishly, lowering her gaze. And here you are. What do you want from me, shelter? Care while you wait for Prince Charming to stroll back in? I hoped you'd let me stay just until I get back on my feet, she pleaded. There's a shelter downtown, I pointed out. That's what they're for. That's where my taxes go, to keep people like you off the streets. I tried, but they were full, Daisy confessed. Even the YWCA and the big church downtown had no room. Please, Mike, I'm begging you. I'll do anything, cook, clean, whatever you need. I wanted to lash out, but I held back, glaring at her. She visibly recoiled. What makes you think I'd want you near me? To me, you're contaminated, a walking hazard, I hissed. And then it dawned on me. You've been attempting to sell yourself, I remarked. She lowered her head shyly, tears dripping onto the table as she nodded. How do I appear? No takers, she questioned. I studied her closely before replying. Oh, how the mighty have fallen. Perhaps I should depart, Perhaps I should simply fade away and perish in some, Daisy cried. No one desires me anyhow. I watched her sobbing at the kitchen table, feeling a mix of anger and pity. Despite my strong hatred for her, seeing her like this after all these years was jarring. And then there was Bruce, the dirtbag who had taken her from me to mistreat her. My contempt for him was growing. Raised never to use violence against women, I struggled with conflicting emotions. Taking a reluctant breath, I suggested we eat first. Daisy agreed, expressing her hunger. I prepared scrambled eggs and bacon, recalling how Daisy used to make them. Her eyes lit up when I served her, grateful for the cheese on the eggs. As she ate voraciously, I couldn't help but feel a pang of sympathy. When she finished, she thanked me for the meal and praised my cooking. She declined more food but asked for another cup of coffee. Sure, I replied, taking her cup. When I returned, she sipped her coffee and seemed to feel better, a little. The food helped, she admitted. Good. The shower might help more, I suggested bluntly. No offense, but you stink. Daisy's face fell. I'm sorry, can I use your shower, please? You know where it is, I said. Towels are where they always are. My robe will be on the door. Don't put it back on after your shower. You can use the washer and dryer for your clothes. As she disappeared into the bathroom, I grumbled about cleaning, then washed dishes, went upstairs to get ready, and reflected on Daisy's departure with Bruce, the betrayal that devastated me. Counseling helped, and I poured my feelings into writing, eventually publishing a book about my experience, bringing some closure. Another factor in maintaining my sanity was my involvement in martial arts. Initially, two senseis urged me to quit due to my intensity during sparring. However, I found guidance from a retired Marine at the community center. Unlike others, he remained composed during our sessions, teaching me to channel my emotions into controlled strikes rather than letting them dictate my actions. It was a challenging skill to master, as evidenced by the bruises I accumulated. Meeting Daisy again took me by surprise, especially seeing her health decline. I wondered if she was sick. Oddly, my anger shifted toward Bruce. Even though I initially wanted to push Daisy away, I hesitated. What if something happened to her? Could I handle the aftermath? The idea of worsening my emotional state and facing potential legal issues wasn't appealing. I decided to get another perspective and called my mom. Morning, Mike, she greeted cheerfully. What's on your mind? Skipping the usual chit-chat, I blurted out, guess who showed up this morning? Now you got me curious. Who? She asked. Daisy, I confessed. I heard her sigh. What's the deal? What does she want? She probed. I recounted Daisy's situation and what she told me. Mom, she looks awful. My gut says I should kick her out, but... You'd regret it if something happened to her, Mom predicted, echoing my worry. Yeah, you're probably right. Plus, she treated Bruce terribly, I added. I know she hurt you deeply, Mom acknowledged, but maybe hearing her out is the wise move. How about I come over later? Knowing Mom's talent for unraveling things, I agreed. Sounds good, Mom. Your input would be invaluable. Let me handle it for now, and I'll see you soon. Thanks, Mom. I really appreciate it, I expressed gratefully. We wrapped up our chat, and I tended to my chores. Slipping into my usual summer gear of a tee and jeans, I went downstairs. Daisy had already started laundry, wearing my old robe and slippers as she waited for me in the living room. I didn't bother to check if she had anything on underneath. The robe was tightly tied, showing dark stains on her legs. Though she smelled better, she didn't look any better. Want a coffee refill? I offered. Yes, please, she accepted. Pouring another cup, I joined her as she sipped. Her shaky hands caught my eye. Thanks, she mumbled. I'll leave once my clothes are done, she added. No hurry, I assured her. I do have some questions if you don't mind, I continued. Sure, Daisy agreed. Bruce faced malpractice claims. Weren't doctors like him insured? I asked. They were, but it turned into a class action. Even though most claims were baseless, the insurance refused coverage due to many judgments against him, Daisy clarified. Some claims were proven true? I probed. The unproven ones were dismissed due to lack of evidence, she explained. But the damage was done. We lost our jobs and licenses. Didn't you have 401 Ks? I questioned. Surprised. Yes, we did. We lived off them for a year, paying hefty penalties, but we lost everything, Daisy lamented. What's Bruce doing now? I chuckled, recalling his earlier dreams. He works as a parking attendant, making about $16 an hour, she revealed. And your plans? I redirected. I thought about office work in the medical field. Despite losing my nursing license, I'm hopeful, Daisy replied quietly. Best of luck, I offered. Transportation and housing, I pressed. I can take the bus or walk, she sighed. I'll figure something out, but it takes money, she acknowledged. And you don't have any, I noted. Expected me to support you until you bounce back, huh? I took a gamble with the question. Yes, Daisy admitted. I get I'm not owed anything, but I hoped, given what I sacrificed in the divorce, you might show some kindness. My infatuation blinded me to your struggles. Now I see assuming was a mistake. You're right, I don't owe you, I affirmed. She seemed defeated, but I sighed and added, but I'm not heartless. You clearly need help. My mom's on her way. She wants to talk before I decide. Of course, Daisy replied, visibly relieved. Your mom's always meant a lot to me and she adored you, I noted. Then, unexpectedly, she said, despite it all, Mom still cared for you. Cared? Daisy asked, surprised. Yes. So you need to be brutally honest with her, understand? I do, I promise, honesty, Daisy assured. And Mike? What? I asked. Thank you, genuinely, for everything, Daisy expressed. Hold off on the thanks, I cautioned. Just then, the doorbell rang. I peeked through the peephole, seeing my mom, so I greeted her with a hug as I let her in. Daisy, goodness, has it really been 10 years? My mom exclaimed, spotting Daisy in my old robe. Both women hugged and exchanged kisses. It's nice to see you again, Lorraine, Daisy replied. Mike, dear, why don't you give us some girl time? My mom suggested. Knowing she wanted privacy, I headed to my home office, closing the door. I surfed the web, looking into the malpractice lawsuit against Dr. Bruce Williams. After some searching, I stumbled upon troubling information. Bruce had reportedly diagnosed around 97% of his 2,000 patients with epilepsy over 4 years. However, many children were misdiagnosed or over-medicated, leading to unnecessary treatments and procedures. Daisy was often implicated as an accomplice. The hospital had to refund $300,000 for improper billing, prompting their termination and license revocation. Reading this, I was appalled. Bruce seemed to be the ringleader, with Daisy following his lead. My mother interrupted, expressing concern about Daisy's health and suggesting a visit to Dr. McGregor. Her grave tone weighed heavily on me. Terry McGregor had been our family doctor for years, and Mom had worked for him until retiring recently. Why, Mom? I pondered. I can't diagnose, but I've seen many cancer cases in women. I bet she needs urgent medical attention, but she didn't stop there. I know Daisy has strained your bond, and I understand, Mom admitted. But if she's dealing with health issues, we should help. It's the right thing. She gave me a small, lopsided smile. I never said being a Christian was easy, did I? Plus, Michael James Carpenter, your father and I didn't raise you to be cold-hearted, did we? I wrinkled my nose, returning her smile, and shook my head. So, she went on, I called Dr. McGregor. He'll see her today and run tests. If they find anything, they'll refer her to a specialist and assist with Medicaid. She'll change, and I'll drive her, Mom decided. You can't afford that, I objected. Here, take this. I handed her 2 $100 bills. Thanks, Mike. You're a good son, she acknowledged. Just so we're clear, I'm not doing this for her. I'm doing it because of the values you taught me. That doesn't mean I forgive her or take her back, I asserted firmly. Got it, Mom replied quietly. An awkward silence hung in the air. Did she mention that idiot Bruce assaulted her? I finally asked. Yes, she did, Mom confirmed, her face neutral, her voice steady. I nodded briskly. That scoundrel needs consequences, I thought. Another tense silence followed. Keep me updated, I instructed. I will, Mom assured, kissing my forehead before leaving. Exiting my office, I saw Daisy in a different outfit, still worn but clean. Thanks for breakfast, she murmured timidly. You're welcome, I replied stiffly. After they left, I locked up and grabbed more coffee, researching Wisconsin's laws on spousal abuse. Sadly, I found the time limit for prosecution was discouraging. Unsure of when Bruce attacked Daisy, I doubted the authorities could act. Feeling frustrated, I briefly considered taking matters into my own hands. To clear my head, I changed and rode my stationary bike, pushing myself through a tough workout. Over the years, I had gone from unfit to fit, sticking to a regular exercise routine. Afterward, feeling refreshed, I showered, dressed, and had a light lunch while catching up on the news. By the time I listened to Mom's message, it was mid-afternoon. Was wondering where you guys were, I said as I answered the phone. Just finished with Dr. McGregor, Mom replied wearily. Judging by her tone, Daisy wasn't nearby. Any updates, I asked? McGregor's concerned about Daisy. Test results suggest cervical cancer. He's arranged an appointment with an oncologist for Friday. She's applied for Medicaid and emergency aid. McGregor also suspects physical abuse, Mom disclosed. We're aware, I acknowledged. She mentioned not eating, Mom continued, her concern evident. But McGregor thinks it's more severe, lacking essential nutrients. Seeing her worry, I nodded. It's late. I'll take her for a meal. Grab essentials in her suitcase. She should stay with me. We need to talk, Mom suggested. Sounds like a plan, I agreed. Keep me posted. Love you, Mom said. Love you too, I replied. About 3 hours later, they were on their way. We settled in the study while Daisy packed. Sorry for the delay, Mom began. No worries, I said. What's the plan? Caring for Daisy till her appointment. She still cares for you. Wanted you to know, Mom explained. No reconciliation, not after her lies and infidelity, I said firmly. Understood, Mom replied. She thinks she can win you back, Mom revealed. Out of the question, I asserted. Besides, I've changed. I miss the old you, Mom admitted. Can you join us for dinner on Friday, she asked. I'll make lasagna. Absolutely, I agreed. Your lasagna always brings a smile. We hugged and returned to the front room where Daisy was waiting with her suitcase. I'll stay with your mom, if that's okay, she said weakly. That's up to her, I replied, noticing my mom's expression. Thanks for breakfast and for listening, Daisy said tearfully. You're welcome, I nodded. Don't forget about dinner on Friday, my mom reminded unnecessarily. I'll be there, I promise, I assured her. Over the next 2 days, I kept busy with work and household chores. With school out for summer, I had to tackle curriculum planning and home maintenance. I trusted my mom to take care of Daisy, knowing her resourcefulness in navigating challenges. Finally, Friday arrived. After a shower, I picked up wine and headed to my mom's for lasagna. Arriving at 6:15, Daisy greeted me and led me inside. Mom was busy in the kitchen, and Daisy appeared on the verge of tears. I thanked Daisy as I entered the kitchen, and Mom's face lit up at the sight of the wine. We sat down to enjoy the meal, though Daisy seemed visibly distressed. How did things go today? I finally inquired. We managed to get Daisy's application approved, Mom reported. Thank goodness for this newfangled internet system. I wish they'd had it when I retired. Observing her forced optimism, I sought reassurance. So Daisy's medical costs will be covered? Yes, and she'll get a monthly allowance from the state. Since she'll be living here, she won't need much, Mom confirmed. They're pursuing child support, but it's like squeezing blood from a turnip, I muttered grimly. That's good, I replied. And the oncologist? Daisy's expression darkened, signaling ominous news. They found stage 4 cervical cancer, Mom disclosed. It's spreading rapidly throughout her body. Can it be treated? I asked, grappling with mixed emotions. Maybe, Mom responded cautiously, with Daisy's consent. They continued. Survival odds are less than 20%. Treatment's an option, but no guarantees, Mom explained. Doctors think it started out 4 years ago, Daisy admitted tearfully. If caught. Earlier, my chances would have been over 90%. That's terrible. Bruce didn't notice anything, I probed. No, he never mentioned it, Daisy explained. I noticed some changes, but I didn't want to worry him. What kind of changes? I asked delicately. Closeness became painful, Daisy confessed. We stopped altogether for a while. Redirecting the conversation, I said, new medications might help. Yes, Mom added. They could improve her odds by 10 or 15%. What's your plan? I asked Daisy. Fight. I'm not ready to give up, she declared. And how long will treatment last? I questioned Mom. Up to a year, maybe longer, she replied. Will Daisy stay here? I pressed. I think it's best. I'll care for her, Mom assured. Reluctantly, I agreed. I suppose that makes sense. Can you handle this? Mom asked. I glanced at Daisy, recalling our history. Memories flooded back of her callous actions with Bruce. Daisy noticed my change in demeanor. I know you don't trust me, but, she started. Understatement, I sharply interjected. If you injure my mother or cause trouble, I'll kick you out, cancer or not. Understand? Yes, Daisy replied quietly, tears welling. Mom intervened, suggesting dessert. I can help, I offered, but Mom declined. You two could use some time alone, she said, leaving. Daisy wiped her face. I started reading your book, she said. Was I that terrible? I have footage from that night, I revealed. Would you like to see it? Daisy declined, stunned. No wonder you despise me, she said, sobbing. It's all in the book, I continued. I imagined revenge for years. Daisy was horrified. Yolanda suggested exercise, Mom added, bringing apple pie. That's why you look so good now? Daisy asked. Yes, I confirmed. I've been doing martial arts and fitness. But you're still angry, Daisy observed. It's better, Mom reassured. 2 years ago, you wouldn't have even come through the door. I'm truly sorry, Mike. I really am. I knew it would hurt, but I didn't anticipate it would devastate you like this. That's why I gave you everything in the divorce. I thought it would aid in your recovery. When you didn't contest it, I assumed you'd be all right, Daisy explained. To be honest, my lawyer was taken aback when he saw your petition. He urged me to sign it swiftly, fearing you might reconsider, I confessed. Have you dated anyone since then? Daisy asked tentatively. Not really, I replied bluntly. Just a couple of drunken one-night stands, but that's about it. I don't even recall their names. I noticed my mother's eyebrows shoot up, a look of disgust crossing her face, but she held back her thoughts. At that moment, I didn't care about her reaction. Oh God, Daisy sighed. I don't know what to say. A sorry won't be enough, will it? No, I replied bitterly. We ate pie in silence, Daisy's hurt evident, and I avoided looking at Mom's face. After saying goodbye, Mom walked me to the door where I spoke quietly. Are you sure you're doing the right thing, Mom? I asked. What about her family? Can't they help? I called her parents and sister, but they refused to help, Mom replied sadly. What a screwed up family, I muttered. You didn't abandon me, I told Mom. Despite turning bitter, family takes care of family. I agree, Mom said tearfully. What are Daisy's chances really? I asked. Mom looked at Daisy before answering. It's hard to say. Progress has been made in treatment, but it's uncertain. A lot depends on her will to live. Ignoring that, I expressed concern for my mom's well-being. What if she does something behind your back? I worried. I know you don't trust her, but she's at rock bottom right now. People with nothing have nothing to lose, I reasoned. Be careful. If you need anything, let me know, I urged. I will, Mom promised. Thanks for dinner. I'll be in touch. Love you, I said. Love you too, son, Mom replied, kissing my cheek. Please try to keep your emotions in check, Mom requested. Don't push her further, she pleaded. I'll try, I sighed heavily. That's all I ask, Mom said, and I promise not to play matchmaker. Thank you, I smiled before leaving. The next 2 months flew by as I tackled home projects and prepared for the upcoming school year. On Fridays, I visited my mom's house for dinner. I witnessed Daisy's chemotherapy taking a toll, weakening her. Despite the treatment's intent to heal, it seemed ineffective in her case. By mid-August, she lost all her hair, donning a stylish chemo cap. While my feelings for her remained unchanged, I made an effort to be polite, mainly for my mom's peace of mind. Daisy began receiving deductions from Bruce's paycheck, albeit small. She opened a bank account, with Mom overseeing the funds. Daisy insisted on sharing with Mom for expenses. Mom agreed, setting aside 10% for emergencies. On the eve of the new school year, I arrived at Mom's house to find an unfamiliar car parked outside. The sight of Bruce triggered an unsettling feeling. Mom and Daisy seemed apprehensive. Bruce appeared disheveled, a stark contrast to his former self. The restrained part of my mind reacted with restrained aggression. Observing Bruce's decline, he lacked his previous commanding presence, appearing unkempt in dirty jeans and a shirt. Well, look who it is, the arrogant teacher, Bruce sneered arrogantly. My animosity towards him had peaked. Though I'd never been in a physical altercation before, my martial arts training had taught me to avoid fights whenever possible. Even if you emerge victorious, the repercussions can linger for a lifetime. What's your business here, Bruce? I asked icily. I want the money that woman took from me, he growled. Took? I thought the court mandated a portion of your income for alimony, I stated evenly, though my gaze probably conveyed my disdain. It's all the same. They seized my funds and now I'm facing eviction because I can't pay rent, Bruce hissed. Thanks to her, you had the money to travel here from Milwaukee, I pointed out. You could have used it for rent. Don't play games, teacher. Maybe I should have taught you a lesson 10 years ago, he threatened. She stopped me, insisted I treat you with respect for looking after her all those years, Bruce threatened. How about you leave and we pretend none of this happened, I suggested cautiously, raising my hands in an attempt to defuse the situation that could lead to a violent confrontation, leaving me with bruises and a few well-timed counterattacks. But he likely didn't know Daisy's condition. She was ill, battling cancer, and she needed support. Cancer, huh? Is that another one of her lies? Bruce scoffed, placing his soda and sandwich aside before producing a revolver from behind him. Funny, I happen to have the cure for that, he taunted, aiming the weapon at Daisy. Bruce, please, my mom pleaded, gesturing towards her phone on the table. The emergency operator likely heard our entire exchange. Please, I've already called the police, they're on their way. I began to position myself between Bruce and Daisy, but he swiftly directed the weapon toward me. Desperation was evident in his eyes. Mentally, I retreated. I hadn't come this far, survived this much, to be senselessly shot by a cop. Stay put, teacher, not one move, Bruce warned, his hands trembling. In that instant, we spotted flashing red and blue lights outside the front window and heard a voice over the intercom. Mr. Williams, this is the police. The house is surrounded. We're aware you're armed. "Drop your weapon and come out with your hands up," the officer instructed. "You should listen," I warned Bruce, who stared wide-eyed. "How did they know about my weapon?" Bruce inquired. "I informed them. I saw it tucked in your waistband," Mom disclosed. "And Mike's right, follow their orders." "This is your final chance, Mr. Williams. Surrender the weapon and exit the premises," the officer commanded through the speaker. Glancing at us, Bruce seemed to grow increasingly uneasy. Our eyes met briefly, and I noticed his resolve waver. "If you were wise, you'd comply," I advised. "There won't be another warning." As the back door opened, 2 officers suddenly appeared in the room, pistols drawn, aimed at Bruce. "Drop your weapons," one ordered. Bruce turned, eyes widening as he realized he was facing 2 loaded weapons. Recklessly, he raised his firearm, but the officers fired first. Despite the ringing in my ears, Daisy's scream pierced through, shocking me. 2 more officers entered the room as my mom reacted, clutching an heirloom. Frozen, I watched as officers attended to Daisy and my wounded mom, while 2 others knelt beside Bruce. 1. Officer confirmed Bruce's death, leaving me shaken. Despite feeling a mix of relief and resentment, I steadied my mom. Paramedics arrived, determining Bruce's fate and attending to Daisy. I offered to accompany my mom to the hospital. At the crime scene, detectives took our statement and advised us to leave. They assured us of securing the house and provided a cleaning service recommendation. Driving to the hospital, my mind spun with conflicting emotions. At the hospital, we navigated bureaucracy, eventually settling in the waiting area for Daisy's surgery. Finally, the doors parted and a doctor approached us. "Mrs. Carpenter?" he inquired. "Yes, that's me," Mom confirmed. "How's Daisy?" "Miss Williams is stable and improving. I anticipate she'll pull through the gunshot wound. Fortunately, the bullet passed through without hitting any critical organs." "She's fortunate," the doctor informed us. "Just a tad to the left, and it could have been fatal." "Thank the Lord," Mom breathed a sigh of relief. "She's lost considerable blood, and her compromised state due to cancer and chemotherapy isn't in her favor. However, we've detected something else and informed her oncologist," the doctor disclosed. "Oh? What's that?" Mom inquired. "I'm aware she's undergoing chemotherapy, but we've detected what seems to be signs of infection in her system. I've ordered a battery of tests as a precaution," he explained. "Oh dear," Mom sighed. "Will she be all right?" "It's too early to say. She's currently sedated. We'll need to keep her here for a minimum of 3 days." "May we visit her?" Mom requested. "I'm afraid not. Perhaps tomorrow morning at the earliest. Let me provide you with a card. You can reach this number anytime for updates and to learn her room assignment," he said, handing Mom the card. We drove back to Mom's house in silence, with her crying most of the way. My thoughts were consumed by the surreal situation. Daisy, whom I once harbored dark fantasies about, was now fighting for her life in the hospital. Despite feeling a pang of remorse, I pushed the thoughts aside. Arriving home, I noticed the crime scene tape discarded in the trash, and a note from the detective declaring the scene cleared. Mom wasted no time in cleaning up, while I disposed of the chair Daisy had been shot in. Upon my return, I found Mom on her knees, tears mixing with the blood as she scrubbed the floor. Offering help, she declined, determined to manage alone. I suggested she stay at my place, but she insisted on staying. Respecting her decision, I resolved to stay with her despite her protestations. I offered to cook dinner before we turned in. Sharing a knowing look, we agreed a glass of wine would be a fitting end to a tumultuous day. As she resumed cleaning, her movements became more frantic. Concerned about potential nightmares, we found solace in a glass of wine or sheer exhaustion, sleeping deeply until morning. We moved through the house quietly until the phone interrupted our somber atmosphere around 10. I retreated to the kitchen to give her privacy, and when she joined me minutes later, she relayed Daisy's condition, serious but stable, undergoing tests with an expected return to her room by mid-afternoon. Lost in thought, I barely registered any emotions. She interrupted my introspection, requesting a ride to the hospital at 2:30. I agreed, departing early to handle errands before meeting her at her house and proceeding to the hospital. After purchasing gifts for Daisy, including her favorite flowers and a book, Mom teased me playfully at the register, prompting me to defensively brush off any deeper sentiment. But her words lingered, reminding me that feelings, even complex ones, were valid. Afterward, we headed to Daisy's room. Though awake, she appeared drained. Mom planted a kiss on her cheek and passed her the purchased card. Her eyes sparkled when she noticed the flowers. "My favorites! You remembered!" she exclaimed, surprised. Her voice, though weak, held a pleasant tone. "Yes," I responded, extending the novel. If I recall correctly, you were reading it when you left with Bruce, I added, my voice devoid of emotion, though a slight pang hit my gut. Yes, I did read it, but never got to finish. Thank you, she murmured softly, not meeting my gaze as she thumbed through the paperback. Any updates? Mom inquired. Not yet, Daisy answered, shaking her head. She closed the book but held on to it tightly as if it were a cherished possession, nestling into it like a teddy bear. She added, They said I probably won't hear anything for at least a day. That's okay, Mom agreed. Then the nurse chimed in. How are you feeling? Terrible, Daisy groaned. I'm exhausted, my side and stomach ache. They'll figure it out, Mom comforted. And Bruce? Daisy inquired, still avoiding my gaze. He was pronounced dead at the scene, Mom informed her. Good, Daisy stated firmly, finally showing some strength. I'm glad he's dead. Mom's expression darkened, but she remained silent, gently patting Daisy's hand and nodding in understanding. I stayed quiet while the women conversed. Hearing my ex-wife denounce Bruce eased some of the pent-up animosity, yet it couldn't erase a decade of bitterness. A nurse entered, checking Daisy's vital signs and administering medication. Time for your meds, Daisy, the nurse said, handing her a cup of pills. Daisy swallowed them with water, expressing exhaustion. Call me Daisy, she requested, showing resilience despite her weariness. I'll inform the staff, the nurse said, suggesting rest for Daisy. Mom inquired about test results, and the nurse assured they'd have news by tomorrow morning. After exchanging farewells, I noticed Daisy's longing glance as we left. I offered a faint smile before closing the door. After dropping off my mom, I returned home to tackle my weekend tasks. The following morning, we convened in Daisy's hospital room. Mom, a part-time volunteer, had arrived a couple of hours earlier. Soon after my arrival, 2 doctors entered. I was introduced to Dr. Samuels, Daisy's surgeon, and Dr. Kincaid, her oncologist. Though they tried to appear assured, their concern was palpable. What's the update? I inquired, eager for positive news despite their demeanor. Dr. Kincaid responded first. Miss Williams is grappling with both peritonitis and diverticulitis, which can account for some of the symptoms you've mentioned previously. Dr. Samuels elaborated. Mrs. Carpenter, he addressed my mom, taking over the report. Our scans have detected several large pockets of infection in Daisy's abdomen. Furthermore, we suspect her gallbladder is perforated and will need to be removed. How did this occur? I inquired, feeling my mom's hand tighten around mine. There are likely multiple factors, but it appears she had an underlying condition exacerbated by cancer and chemotherapy medications, Dr. Kincaid responded. What's the next step? My mom asked softly. She will eventually require surgery to eradicate the infection and repair the damage, but we'd like to allow her body more time to recover from the recent surgery she underwent. So, we'll keep her here on antibiotics for the next couple of weeks to monitor if the infection subsides naturally. Chemotherapy will be paused during this period, Dr. Samuels explained. What are her odds? I asked, striving to maintain composure. The doctors exchanged glances before replying. I didn't like the gravity in their expressions. I won't sugarcoat it, Dr. Samuels began. Without surgery, her prospects are grim. Her body is currently delicately balanced. Administering high doses of antibiotics could potentially disrupt her metabolism and further weaken her, potentially even leading to a fatal outcome. Although the current antibiotic regimen seems to have halted the infection spread and is gradually reducing it, it won't mend the damage. While there's no visible perforation in the bowel wall, she was likely on the brink of it when we intervened. Exploratory surgery aimed at identifying unseen issues carries significant risks at this point. Manipulating the intestines could inadvertently worsen the situation. Our goal is to cleanse the intestines of infection and mend any damage. She must be robust enough to endure surgery and chemotherapy afterward. Malnutrition has severely debilitated her, and she won't withstand chemotherapy until the infections are eradicated and her other bodily functions normalize. Peritonitis alone poses a grave threat, and coupled with cancer, he trailed off with a shrug. The surgery itself poses significant risks, Dr. Kincaid interjected. Very significant, considering the extent of infection in her abdomen and the damage to her internal organs. Her chances of survival are estimated to be between 30 and 40%. So without surgery, my chances are slim to none, queried Daisy solemnly. Though her eyes were wide and she appeared to be sweating, her voice remained steady. Unfortunately, that appears to be the case, confirmed Dr. Kincaid. However, once you recover from the surgery, you should be able to proceed with chemotherapy without complications. In that case, it seems we have no alternative but to proceed with the surgery, Daisy conceded weakly, sinking back onto the bed. Very well. We'll organize everything accordingly, declared Dr. Samuels. With their departure, Daisy broke into tears. Her mother embraced her, offering solace. Don't fret, Daisy. You have the finest medical team in the hospital on your side. Everything will work out, she reassured Daisy amid her sobs. I had much to contend with, and this wasn't the place for it. It was odd. Not long ago I might have welcomed news of Daisy's demise, but now my emotions were in turmoil. I have to head out. School starts tomorrow, but I'll check in on you from time to time, I offered. Yeah, I'd appreciate that, Mike, Daisy exclaimed. Mom smiled at me. We left the room and I walked her to her car, waving as she drove away. Over the next 2 weeks, I kept my promise, visiting Daisy several times. We discussed various topics, from my teaching and students to her failed marriage with Bruce and our own failed marriage. We also delved into our emotions and the events that led us here. During one visit, I brought up her family. I'm curious, I began. What? Daisy asked. What's the deal with your family? Why do they dislike you so much? Mom reached out to them, but they want nothing to do with you. Remember when I mentioned they disowned me after the lawsuit? Daisy recalled. Yes, I remember, I replied. What I didn't tell you is they knew about Bruce from the start. They agreed to keep you in the dark, and in return, Bruce promised to support them in retirement. He even offered to buy them cruise tickets. And you and your sister knew about this? I asked, feeling anger rising. Daisy looked down in shame. Yes, she whispered before meeting my gaze again. It was another betrayal. I know, and I'm deeply sorry. So your family used you and Bruce, just like you used me, I observed, my tone icy. She looked miserable. I tempered my emotions. If you don't want the answer, don't ask the question. Mostly, Daisy admitted sorrowfully. Things went downhill after the lawsuit, and my family wanted nothing to do with me. That explains their treatment of me after you left, I remarked. It also sheds light on why you thought it was acceptable to use me while waiting for Bruce. Everyone seemed to have the upper hand except me. Reinforcing my belief that reconciliation with Daisy was unlikely, given all that had transpired, Daisy seemed to share this sentiment, showing no initiative to revive what we once had. However, as we reconciled, I glimpsed the woman I fell in love with, sparking hope. Surprisingly, my animosity towards her and Bruce lessened after his demise, although I still wished for his just punishment beyond this life. Mr. Smith granted me the day off for Daisy's surgery, arranging for a substitute teacher. At the hospital, I expressed my worries before she was wheeled into the operating room. I've said hurtful things and I'm sorry, I began. I hope you can overcome this. Daisy's weak smile surprised me. Thank you, Mike. I accept your apology. I'm sorry for what I've done to you, she confessed. I love you, and you've endured more than you should have. Promise me something, she implored. What? I inquired. Find someone you love no matter what, she sincerely urged. I agreed, feeling a sense of absolution. We need to proceed to the operating room, sir, the orderly interrupted. For one moment, I requested. Spontaneously, I kissed Daisy's cheek. You've got this, I reassured her. For a brief moment, she resembled the woman I married, prompting me to wonder if she ever truly loved me beyond my role as a provider. I rose, feeling a bit lightheaded as the orderly guided her gurney out of the room. That was kind of you, Mike, Mom murmured softly as we followed into the operating room. After she was wheeled inside, we settled in the waiting area. Hours passed while the surgery progressed. Attempting to focus on the TV proved futile. My thoughts remained fixated on the tumultuous events of the past decade. Mom crocheted quietly while I paced, drowning myself in one cup of machine-made coffee after another, trapped in a relentless cycle of memories. 6 hours later, Dr. Samuels emerged from the operating room with a troubling expression. He motioned for us to join him in a nearby room, where he sat across from us, visibly weary. I braced for bad news, fearing he might break down in tears. Mom's grip on my hand was so tight it made my fingers ache, and I anticipated his words before he uttered them. I'm deeply sorry, Mrs. Carpenter, Mr. Carpenter. We did everything within our power for Daisy. However, the level of infection and damage to her internal organs was too severe, he conveyed with sorrow. Her body ceased functioning. She had signed a DNR and a form consenting to donate her body to cancer research. Despite our ethical efforts, once her heart stopped, we were unable to revive her. Please accept my condolences for your loss. Instantly, tears streamed down Mom's face, and though I felt a tear welling up in my eye, I refused to let it fall. I embraced my mother as she wept, nodding in acknowledgement to the doctor. Thank you for all your efforts, I expressed to him. We exchanged a handshake, and I noticed a tear escaping from his eye. Once Mom had composed herself, we walked back to Daisy's room in a daze. We packed her belongings in silence, knowing words were unnecessary. In the bedside table drawer, I discovered a small envelope labeled Mike in Daisy's handwriting. I opened it and unfolded the letter inside. "Mike," the letter commenced, "you will only read this if I do not survive. Thank you for being there for me, especially in these last weeks. You owe me nothing, but you and your mother stood by me when others deserted me. I realize what I did to you a decade ago was inexcusable, and I deeply regret causing you pain. Despite everything, a part of me still loves you, and I'm sorry for the turmoil my involvement with Bruce has caused me. I understand that you will never feel the same toward me, and I respect that. My hope is that my passing will bring you peace at last. With love, Daisy." The note left me trembling, tears streaming down my face as I showed it to my mom. It unleashed a torrent of emotions. We shared, crying and holding each other, the first time I'd wept since my father's passing 6 years ago. Packing Daisy's belongings, I realized a profound change within me. A decade of anger and bitterness evaporated, replaced by an unexpected calmness. Her passing seemed to break down walls of resentment, offering me a way out of the dark maze I'd been trapped in. Strangely, her passing brought healing. After leaving the hospital in a daze, we settled Daisy's things at my mom's house, sharing a sober dinner. Later, she handed me a photo of Daisy smiling in her mother's chair during chemotherapy, a memento to cherish. Asking about contacting Daisy's family, my mom offered to call, but I declined, recalling a previous difficult conversation. Instead, I promised to make the call once home, taking the number she provided. Calling Daisy's father, Fred, I was met with hostility, leaving me puzzled by his animosity, considering their refusal of support and retirement crews. "I regret to inform you that your daughter Daisy passed away during surgery today," I conveyed. "I don't have a daughter named Daisy," Fred grumbled. "Not anymore," I clarified. "Why are you calling?" Fred inquired. "I just thought you might want to know," I responded. "What do you want from me?" Fred questioned. "Are you expecting us to request her body or something?" I countered, "No, she donated her body to cancer research," I disclosed, barely containing my frustration. "Well, at least her life served a purpose," he growled. "Don't call here again." I heard him curse before terminating the call. Although I felt the urge to call back and vent my anger, I realized it would be futile. With a sigh, I dialed my principal's number and informed him of the news. "I'm sorry to hear that, Mike," he sympathized. "How are you holding up?" "I'm managing," I replied, "but I'll be okay." "Say, why don't you take the remainder of the week off, and I'll mark it as paid parental leave. I'll arrange for a substitute." "Thank you. I really appreciate it," I expressed. After concluding our conversation, I retrieved a beer from the fridge. As I opened the bottle, I gazed at the photo my mom had given me. "Here's to you, kid," I murmured, taking a deep sip. In June, I drove to the cemetery, always feeling uneasy among reminders of mortality. Parking under a large maple tree, I made my way to the monument. Despite its newness, it bore the name Williams, a decision I reluctantly accepted due to bureaucratic insistence. I placed a white carnation in the bronze flower tube beside the monument, reflecting on the decision to bury Daisy's ashes rather than scatter them. Bruce, on the other hand, lay in a neglected corner, marked only by a simple concrete block with a serial number. Afterward, I poured a bottle of urine on his grave, a solitary act of closure. If anyone caught me urinating on his grave, I'd have some explaining to do. After a few minutes of reflection, I bid him farewell. All my tears were shed last week at her burial. Despite reaching out to Daisy's family and friends, I figured if Joe DiMaggio could honor Marilyn for 2 decades, I could lay Daisy to rest and leave her carnations. Sometimes, amidst the grayness, I felt neither sad nor happy, but like an empty blackboard waiting to be filled. Heading back to my car, I noticed 2 other mourners nearby, a woman in a neat black dress, her long blonde hair braided, and a young boy in a camouflage jacket. Approaching them, I glanced at the sign, Ryan G. Angers, Sergeant, USMC. The woman looked at me with fear in her blue eyes. "I'm sorry," I murmured, not wanting to intrude. Before she could respond, the boy said, "I miss him so much," his eyes reflecting the same shade of blue as his mother's, his words laden with longing, perhaps seeking solace or reaching out for help. He must have been a handsome man if he resembled his father. I knelt down, pulling out a notepad and pen from my pocket, tools I used more than my phone's note function. "Here, son," I said, offering them to him. "Write him a note and tuck it in that crack next to the marker. He'll get it." He hugged me, took the notebook and pen, and began writing. As he did, his mother gazed at me with genuine gratitude. Suddenly, I heard 2 soft chuckles, one in each ear, a female and a male. Then the female voice whispered, "Keep your promise." In that moment, I sensed June would no longer be a struggle for me.
Hello everyone. My name is Jennifer. I didn't grow up rich, but I still managed to get a job and get married. My husband's name is Max, and he works at a fancy hotel. I thought my life would be a fairy tale, but things didn't turn out that way. My childhood home wasn't wealthy, we didn't have a lot of money, but I don't blame my parents at all. They gave up nice things for me, took me to fun places, and taught me about different cultures. Maybe they loved geography, but as a kid, I often thought they were trying too hard for me. I didn't want my parents to worry about me anymore, so I decided to start working right after middle school. My mom would say, "You should at least finish high school, it might be hard to find a job without it." My dad would agree, saying, "Yes, we have enough money saved to send you to high school." I was really happy about how my parents felt, but more than that, I wanted to make life easier for them as soon as possible. "It's okay, the sooner I start working, the sooner I'll start earning more," I said, not very sure of myself. But, like my parents said, there was no guarantee I'd find a job. During that time, I had a friend named Jessica, who had moved here from another country when we started middle school. Her family wasn't rich either, which might be why we got along so well and always hung out together. Jessica could speak some English, so we managed to communicate. Without realizing it, I started learning Spanish just by talking with her. By the time I was in 9th grade, I could speak Spanish pretty well. Maybe it was my Spanish skills that helped because, surprisingly, a travel agency decided to hire me. They saw value in my ability to speak Spanish. Jessica and I, having both left school after middle school, started working and gradually lost touch. I focused on my job, determined to earn money. Time passed quickly, and soon I was 26 years old. I often used a hotel lounge for work. It was a fancy but cozy place, and the snacks and coffee were reasonably priced. We held our meetings there with the staff. The waiter working there at the time was Max. The hotel hosted many foreigners, so he spoke Spanish too. Sometimes, I would be there with foreign guests. Maybe because we both spoke Spanish, we connected right away. Max started a conversation, and before I knew it, we were in a whirlwind romance that led to marriage. For a girl from a poor family, getting married was a big deal. I expected to start an exciting new life, however, reality was quite different. When we were getting married, Max had a request. "If it's okay with you, Jennifer, I'd like us to live at my family home." His father had passed away a few years ago, and he was worried about his mother living alone. Her energy levels were dropping, and having someone around to help her seemed like a good idea. Since I worked remotely, Max thought it would be convenient for me to stay home, look after his mother, and handle the household chores. On the flip side, Max often worked long hours and wasn't home much. With his rare days off, having me, a home-based worker, around must have seemed like a good arrangement to him. But I couldn't agree to it right away. When I first visited Max's family home to introduce myself before our marriage, his mother reacted strangely after asking about my education. "Jennifer, which university did you graduate from?" she asked. When I honestly replied, "Well, I didn't go to college. I only finished middle school," my mother-in-law went silent and just looked at me. Her expression showed she looked down on me. "Oh, middle school. Well, she said, eyeing me with disdain. Because of this, I thought living with her might not be easy, so I mentioned my concerns to Max casually. "Max, do you think your mom has some doubts about me?" I asked him. He chuckled a bit and replied, "Nah, that's not true. Mom trusts me, and I'm sure she doesn't have any bad feelings toward my wife either." His words made me think maybe I was worrying too much. Max also promised that if any issues arose, he would talk to his mother for me. With that reassurance, I agreed to move in with his family. But once I started living there, things weren't as smooth as I'd hoped. It was a harsh reality check. Whenever Max and I visited his family's house, his mother would speak to him with such warmth. Max, thank you. I'm so grateful you're living with me, she would say, and Max would respond, of course, I knew it would help you out. They seemed like such a close mother and son. But towards me, my mother-in-law's attitude was completely different, cold, even. Well, Jennifer, just make sure you don't hold Max back, she'd say emotionlessly, as if she were giving orders to a servant. It was clear she still looked down on me. But at that moment, Max stood up for me. Don't worry, Jennifer is doing a great job working too, he said. However, when I mentioned this, my mother-in-law briefly looked stern, a detail I didn't miss. I figured I should talk to Max if things ever got troublesome and decided to handle it my way. We were family, after all, and I didn't want any tension between us. That's how we started living together, but reality didn't bend in a favorable direction. One day, as I was working on my computer as usual, my mother-in-law burst into my room and said angrily, "Hey, Jennifer, when are you going to clean my room? It needs to be done by 10 a.m. every day." I was surprised because I had never heard of such a rule before. Sure, I agreed to do household chores, but we never discussed to what extent. If she had just told me kindly from the beginning, that would have been fine. After all, I have my own job and can't be available all the time. However, arguing wouldn't be mature, so I quickly finished my work, apologized, and started cleaning her room. Meanwhile, my mother-in-law was just relaxing in the living room, watching TV and eating snacks. Max had mentioned concerns about his mother's health, but she seemed well enough to clean her own room. I had imagined she might have difficulty walking, but she was more lively than I thought. Once the cleaning was done, she immediately ordered, "Now, start making dinner, and I like it plain. I won't tolerate anything too strong." She even told me to go shopping for ingredients right away. I thought it was too early to start cooking, but I decided to get it done and return to my work. When I got back from shopping, my mother-in-law was still relaxing. It was hard not to feel annoyed, but I chose to hold back and just finish what needed to be done. I thought maybe she was testing me, hoping she'd understand in time. But that hope lingered for months. There were days when she complained about me being just 5 minutes late with the laundry or that the bathtub wasn't cleaned perfectly, nitpicking to an almost obsessive degree. Before I knew it, I ended up doing all the chores around the house while my mother-in-law just lounged around. Honestly, if she had the energy to nitpick, she could very well do some chores herself. I started to worry that if this continued, it would start affecting my job too. That was the last thing I needed. So, I decided to wait until the evening to talk to Max about it. Once my mother-in-law had gone to bed, I told him everything. "Hey, I think your mom just doesn't like me. I'm getting so tired of being constantly criticized," I said. But Max just chuckled and said, "Come on, that can't be true. Mom's a kind person. There won't be any issues as long as Jennifer doesn't do anything strange. Please try to get along with her." He didn't believe me. Maybe it's because she's always doting on him and never complains to him. In fact, when Max is around, my mother-in-law says, "Jennifer, why don't we take a break and have some tea?" But even knowing that, there's a limit to my patience with this kind of life. I spend all day doing household chores and end up having to work on my job at night. To be honest, my trust in Max is starting to fade. If nothing changes, I might just collapse from all the stress. Then, in the midst of all this, my mother-in-law dropped a bombshell. "Jennifer, I'll be away for about a week, about 3 months from now, so make sure you keep the house in order, okay?" She sprang this on me out of nowhere. When I asked what was going on, she said, "Max suggested we go on an overseas vacation." That's my boy, always knowing. I was thrilled at the thought of traveling abroad. I couldn't wait. But when my mother-in-law dropped the bomb about the vacation, I was shocked. Max hadn't mentioned a word of it to me, and it seemed like I was being left out, expected to stay behind and manage the house. I needed to talk to Max about this right away, so I brought it up that night. His response was surprising. "Oh, Mom already told you. But you're coming too, right?" It turned out we had misunderstood each other. It seems my mother-in-law had lied to me. Even if Max wanted me to go, I couldn't possibly enjoy a trip with her. In frustration, I told him, "I don't want to go. I can't possibly have a good time with your mother." Then Max completely lost it and lashed out. "Jennifer, what the heck are you saying? How long are you going to keep up this childish nonsense? I won't allow you to speak ill of Mom like that. You better reflect on this. It's a vacation abroad, for crying out loud, and I want to enjoy it too," he retorted. I was completely shocked. I couldn't believe Max wouldn't trust me this much. Staying in that house had become nothing but agony for me. To prove to Max that I was telling the truth, I decided to take action. The next day, since Max was off work, the three of us had breakfast together. That's when I confronted my mother-in-law. "You're trying to leave me out of the trip abroad, aren't you?" I asked. My mother-in-law replied defiantly, "Oh, did I say that, Jennifer? If you want to come, just come along, right?" But Max interrupted, "Hey, Jennifer, don't you understand yet? Apologize to Mom. Why are you being so defiant? You're not a child anymore." Despite my desire to clear things up and make Max understand, my mother-in-law insulted me in the worst way. "Well, maybe Jennifer should just stay home, right? It's too early for someone like you to travel abroad. You won't appreciate the experience with your lack of education. Besides, lazing around at home every day without working, do you even deserve to go abroad? You know it, don't you?" she sneered. I was shocked that she still believed I was unemployed. I've explained my job to her multiple times. Even during our greetings, I've told her what I do, haven't I? I confronted her, but she just looked down on me. "What job? Remote work? Don't joke with me. You're just playing on the computer at home. It's been getting on my nerves every day. There's no way you're making money with that. You're just stealing Max's earnings," she blurted out. That really made me angry, but before I could respond, she went even further. "I have Max, and that's enough for me. Max can speak Spanish and works at a renowned hotel. There's no need to waste his earnings on a woman like you, uneducated and unemployed. A bottom feeder like you should just leave as soon as possible." She continued, just kept going. After all her harsh words, I looked at Max, hoping he would understand. But his response was unexpected. "Well, I can understand how Mom feels. Maybe Jennifer needs to cool off a bit," he said nonchalantly, as if he were fed up with me. At that moment, I made a decision. I couldn't endure being treated like this by both the mother and son any longer. Even though my mother-in-law told me to leave, I still wanted to confirm. "Am I really supposed to leave?" I asked, laughing. She replied, "Of course. Leave as soon as you can. We don't need bottom feeders like you around." I said, "Understood," and began preparing to move out. I simply nodded to the two of them and left the house. As I was leaving, my mother-in-law called after me with a sneer. "Enjoy your poor life as it suits a bottom feeder like you," she mocked. But they didn't realize that consequences would follow their actions. About 3 months after I left the house, around the time they were scheduled to go on their trip abroad, my mother-in-law called me. "Jennifer, I finally reached you." "What's going on?" She sounded quite frantic. "First," I replied, "I'm surprised you managed to call this number." She said, "Of course, I tried several times and couldn't get through. I even called your parents' house to get your new number." I had informed my parents that if either Max or my mother-in-law called, they should call back at this number. "What's wrong?" I asked, with a tone of concern. She replied, panicked, "What's wrong? We're getting all sorts of collection letters. Help me out, I didn't know about any of this." "Well, that's expected. You haven't been paying the utilities, have you?" I simply answered. My mother-in-law seemed lost in her thoughts. "I absolutely thought Max was covering our living expenses. To find out you were paying for everything, why didn't you tell me? I had no idea you were making that much money." "It's a bit late to bring this up now," I said, though perhaps Max had finally told her the truth. That's right, I had already started my own business using expertise I gained from the travel agency where I used to work. My business had grown to the point of earning $20 million, being widely accepted around the world. What probably shocked my mother-in-law even more was Max's income. Just because he worked in a lounge at a well-known hotel didn't mean he was making a lot of money. If anything, Max was just an average worker on the lower end of the pay scale, and speaking Spanish at that hotel was nothing special. There were many Spanish speakers there. Even if he could speak it, it wasn't anything remarkable. There was no way his income could cover the living expenses for 3 people. In reality, just making ends meet for himself was all he could manage. It's ridiculous that she hadn't realized until a collection notice came that I was the one paying all the living expenses for my husband's family. But the more I listened to my mother-in-law, the more shocking facts came to light. The reason why she insisted on me living with them wasn't to keep an eye on her, it was because she had been living off my father-in-law's wealth. Blinded by a temporary influx of cash, she had spent lavishly until there was nothing left. That's when she turned to Max, presuming he was earning well. But Max knew his income was low, and he was somewhat aware of my earnings, which is why he turned to me for help. Hearing this only confirmed how irresponsible they were, but their irresponsibility didn't stop there. "By the way, are you managing to make the car payments?" my mother-in-law exclaimed, raising her voice. "Exactly. Both Max and I have bills piling up since you moved out. I've been receiving more and more credit card statements addressed to both of us. The amounts due each month kept increasing, and before I knew it, they amounted to quite a sum. Their level of luxury spending was beyond me. I have no idea how they were spending without paying the living expenses," she added, sounding exasperated. Max's bills had surpassed his salary, and my mother-in-law hadn't stopped her old habits of lavish spending. It seemed they had both gotten themselves into debt, now totaling over $440,000. What's even more shocking is they thought Max would somehow manage it, if it was just a bit of debt, as my mother-in-law put it. And Max thought I would take care of it if things got tough. The level of dependence in grown adults was appalling. Beyond exasperation, I was starting to feel the danger. So when my mother-in-law brazenly said, "So, Jennifer, you can sort this out for us, right?" I was astonished by her audacity. I made it clear to her. "After everything that's happened, you're asking for help now. There's no way I'm helping." That's when Max suddenly took the phone. "Hey, Jennifer, you're my wife. You have a duty to help us out. Do something. We can't pay this off," he demanded. I couldn't believe their nerve, but I did offer him a glimmer of mercy. "So, you want to come over?" "I might consider it if you do," I replied. He was immediately enthusiastic. "Oh yeah. You'll let us stay, and you'll sort out the money. Then let's do that. Where's your place?" "I'll head there right now," he said eagerly. I had to be honest. "Well, if you can make it, I'm in Hawaii right now. I have a vacation home here." Both Max and my mother-in-law couldn't hide their shock. "What? You mean Hawaii? We can't afford to go there right now," Max panicked. I calmly replied, "Weren't you planning to travel abroad? Just swing by Hawaii, your mother would love it. And you did ask my family for my phone number, right? Didn't you realize it was an international number? Oh, and don't forget the cost of this call." It adds up if you're on for a long time, I added, making my point clear. I said, if we get divorced, I might think about helping with the money too. Max quickly replied, all right. I got it. Let's just get divorced first, then. It seemed like Max realized his debts were something he couldn't trade for anything else. So, I told him I'd deliver the divorce papers once I got back to California and ended the call. About a week later, I returned to California, made sure to have the divorce papers properly written up, and the divorce went through without a hitch. Max looked quite worn out, so I guess he'd been living pretty lean these last few days. He mentioned something at that time. It turns out he had been counting on my money for the overseas trip as well. Hearing that didn't even surprise me anymore. They probably thought I would pay off their debts, but of course, I had no intention whatsoever of doing that. What I proposed was, first of all, for both of them to stop living so extravagantly, and then for Max and my mother-in-law to work hard. I told them that if they did, they could eventually pay off the debt and at least manage the basics. When Max heard this, he lashed out. Hey, that's not what you promised. You were supposed to think about the debt. But I replied, that's why I did you a favor by thinking of a way for you both to handle your debt repayment. So, good luck. Once you can afford to travel abroad again, I'll invite you to my Hawaii villa, I said with a touch of sarcasm and left their place. Afterward, they both seemed to be working themselves to the bone from dawn till dusk, barely scraping by. It was probably a good lesson for them since they'd had it easy until now. On a different note, I heard that Jessica also built a house in Hawaii. I had a reunion with her after so long. She took up a job that took her around the world after graduating from middle school and now seems to be a company president, just like me. She had her parents come over to the house she bought, and they've been living it up together. So, I called my parents over from California, and we started living here. Now, I sometimes visit Jessica's place. We both feel blessed to be able to give back to our parents and encourage each other as we work hard at our jobs.
Welcome to my channel. Support our channel by subscribing. Your subscription helps us grow and create more intriguing content like this. Now let's dive into today's story. Liam, 36. A successful software engineer who's worked hard to achieve his current life. Thoughtful and analytical, he trusts deeply, never imagining betrayal could disrupt his carefully planned world. Ava, 34. A creative soul with a captivating personality, Ava has been working on her literary dreams for years. Her passion for storytelling is matched by her charm, which has always made her the center of attention in social circles. Mr. Tucker, 50s. The landlord, who owns the charming historic building they live in, is known for his charisma and approachable demeanor. Behind this facade, he's a cunning man who knows how to manipulate people's emotions and vulnerabilities to get what he wants. Liam and Eva's marriage is built on what he thought was a foundation of trust and love. While he often has to work long hours, he prides himself on the life they've built together. He supports her literary dreams, giving her the time and space to focus on her writing. Little does he know that his sacrifices are silently building a betrayal that will shake him to his core. Over the months, Liam starts noticing subtle changes in Ava's behavior. She's more distant, less affectionate, and often preoccupied. She claims it's due to her writing and finding her voice as an author, a reason he initially believes. One evening, as Liam returns from work, he sees Eva walking up the stairs with Mr. Tucker, laughing about something she brushes off when Liam asks. "Oh, it's just about the building renovations," she says with an innocent smile. But Liam can't ignore the growing feeling in his gut. The ease with which she dismisses his questions and the guarded look in her eyes begin to fuel his suspicion. His suspicion grows further when Ava begins dressing up more frequently, using reasons like meeting with a writing group, or doing research for her novel. The mounting inconsistencies become harder for Liam to brush aside. Every time she leaves, a nagging thought gnaws at him. Is she hiding something? One evening, while sorting through some mail on the kitchen counter, Liam finds an envelope with Ava's name on it. It's unmarked, with no sender address, but curiosity gets the better of him, and he opens it. Inside are two things that send a cold shiver down his spine: a hotel receipt for a recent overnight stay and a handwritten note signed by Mr. Tucker. It reads, "Can't wait for our next writing session, my love." His mind reels, heart pounding. He rereads the note, each word a hammer blow to his chest. He grapples with the realization that Eva's writing sessions were a guise for a hidden affair with the very man who owns the building they live in. Shaken, Liam spends days replaying past moments in his mind, scrutinizing every interaction for clues he may have missed. Determined not to confront her in anger, he decides to wait, biding his time to confront her in a way that will leave no room for her lies. He begins collecting evidence, building a silent case against her betrayal. Each night, as Ava sleeps, he examines her phone, her emails, and the few text exchanges she hasn't deleted. The evidence stacks up: flirtatious messages, photos, and the regular arrangements they made under the pretense of writing sessions. His emotions fluctuate between rage, heartbreak, and a need for justice. But instead of exploding, he nurtures a plan to dismantle something even more dear to her than their marriage. On a rainy night, as thunder rumbles in the background, Liam sits in their dimly lit living room, waiting for Eva to return. She arrives late, her smile faltering when she sees him awake, the intense expression on his face unnerving her. "Ava," he says, barely able to contain the fury in his voice. "We need to talk." She hesitates, her eyes darting nervously around the room. "Sure, Liam. What's going on?" Liam pulls out the hotel receipts and printed copies of the messages he uncovered. He lays them on the coffee table, each piece of evidence a nail in the coffin of their relationship. "Care to explain?" he asks, his voice cold and measured. Ava's face pales as she scans the evidence. "Liam, it's not what it looks like. Please, I can explain." Her voice trembles and she stumbles over her words, offering excuses, blaming her vulnerability, and begging for his forgiveness. She even goes as far as to say Mr. Tucker manipulated her, that she felt lost and needed comfort. But Liam is unmoved. He calmly listens to her pleas, taking in every word while masking his own heartbreak. Then, with steely resolve, he tells her, "Ava, I don't want your excuses. You've made your choice, and now you'll face the consequences." Liam knows Ava's literary ambitions are her deepest passion. For years, she's worked on a novel, pouring her soul into every page. It's her dream, her escape, the one part of herself she values above all else. And so, he devises his revenge. Feigning acceptance, Liam gives Ava a few days to believe they're moving past the affair. She throws herself into her writing, relieved, thinking she still has her marriage and her literary dream. One evening, when she's out, Liam sits at her desk, opens her computer, and locates her manuscript. With a mixture of satisfaction and sorrow, he transfers it to a USB drive and deletes the original from her computer, ensuring no backups remain. To make sure her literary dream is thoroughly crushed, he also sends her publisher a note, posing as Eva, withdrawing her submission, saying, "I've decided to abandon my writing career." The thought of what this will do to her strikes a hollow satisfaction in his heart. The following day, Ava logs into her laptop, ready to continue her novel, only to find every trace of her work gone. Panic consumes her as she frantically searches through every file, folder, and document, only to realize her life's work has vanished. In desperation, she confronts Liam, tears streaming down her face. Liam, please tell me you didn't delete it. That's my life's work. I've spent years on it. She sobs, crumpling to the floor. Liam stands over her, watching the impact of his actions sink in. He speaks slowly, each word cutting into her. I didn't destroy your novel, Eva. You did that the moment you chose to betray me. You destroyed our marriage, and now you've lost something you love just as much. In the days that follow, Ava falls into despair, struggling to come to terms with the consequences of her betrayal. She becomes a shell of her former self, her dream of becoming a published author now shattered. Meanwhile, Liam decides to move on, having cleansed himself of the pain she caused. The two of them go their separate ways, haunted by the memories and choices they made. For Liam, the satisfaction of reclaiming control over his life comes with the bittersweet realization that, despite his revenge, he still has wounds that need healing. And so Liam turned his pain into a lesson for Eva, leaving her with the loss of her own dreams. Thank you for watching this story of betrayal, heartbreak, and justice. We hope it kept you on the edge of your seat. Please let us know in the comments. Would you have done what Liam did? Or would you have handled it differently? Remember to like, share, and subscribe to support our channel for more intense stories like this. Thanks for watching.
For 12 years, I dedicated myself to working in my family's business, only for my father to give it to my estranged sister and her wealthy fiancé instead of me. When they abandoned him following his heart attack, he came to me for help. I am Tessa, a 36-year-old woman, and I was pushed out of the business I had helped build, the same business my father had established just 8 months ago. For context, I've been a part of the family business for almost 12 years now. We have a jewelry business that was started by my grandfather on my father's side, and after all my dedication, I expected it would eventually come to me. After all, I am the older sister, and I've always taken a keen interest in the business ever since my teenage years. My dad, Gerald, constantly reassured me that I would eventually take over the business because my sister, Savannah, 33F, didn't seem interested in pursuing a career. She only wanted to get married and have a family. So, if there was going to be an heir to the business, it was going to be me, and that had always been taken for granted. There was no formal documentation of it, but in hindsight, I should have arranged for something like that, considering I had served as my dad's personal assistant for 12 years. I even quit my first job just 2 years after working there because I didn't want to come off as entitled and wanted to gain genuine work experience on my own before joining my father. Despite everything I'd done, I was still kicked out of the business in favor of my sister and her ridiculously rich fiancé, Landon. Savannah hadn't even been a part of the family for the past 15 years. She made some terrible decisions, and my parents cut her out of the family right after she turned 18. She had announced that she wouldn't be going to college because she wanted to explore and find herself. This didn't sit well with my parents, Gerald and Janice, and they gave her an ultimatum: either go to college or leave. Savannah, being the person she is, chose to leave and moved in with her boyfriend at the time. That relationship didn't last long, and they broke up within 6 months. She returned to our doorstep, asking to be let back into the family. Before she left, she had said some awful things to my parents, like how she didn't need them, how she was better off without a family like ours, and how they weren't good enough for her because her boyfriend's family was wealthier than us. She completely insulted and humiliated us before walking out. When she came back, my dad told her that his condition still stood: she had to go to college and get a degree, no matter the field, or she couldn't return. Savannah tried to argue her way back, but my dad stood firm. She left again, saying she'd never come back. For the next 15 years, we only saw Savannah at family events, and even then, she refused to speak to us. We learned about her life through other relatives, as she refused to keep in contact with my mom or me. Despite several attempts on our part, she cut us off simply because we were still on good terms with my father. I have to give her credit, she was stubborn and stuck to her word. Savannah didn't come back until my dad made the first move and tried to re-establish contact with her. Over time, she figured her life out, though not in the way we expected. As promised, she didn't go to college, but she moved in with a friend and started working various jobs to support herself. I think it was good for her because, over the years, she matured a lot. She switched jobs frequently, but for the past couple of years, she'd been working at an advertising agency. We knew all this because she stayed in touch with the rest of our family, and they kept us updated. About a year ago, my dad's health took a dangerous turn. He had serious heart problems, and we almost lost him. His cardiologist warned us that he needed to make drastic lifestyle changes. During that time, thinking the end was near, my dad decided to contact Savannah and end the feud between them. Savannah, having grown up considerably over the past 15 years, finally came back to the family. The day she visited us, she came alone. We didn't talk much about her life because we were too busy reminiscing about the past, and she didn't want to make it all about herself. So, she didn't tell us much about what she had been up to. The information we didn't get from our relatives was how she was doing professionally, but we didn't know anything about her personal life. Anyway, she seemed happy to be back, and we were all focused on the reconciliation between father and daughter. It was a very emotional reunion, and at the time, I was happy about it all, not knowing what was about to happen later. When she visited us for the second time, she brought along her fiancé, which came as a huge shock to all of us. She told us that she had been dating Landon, her fiancé, for the past 3 years, and they had only recently gotten engaged. No one else in the family knew about it, which is why we hadn't found out either. They had been keeping it under wraps. The flow of information wasn't just one-sided. She had also heard, thanks to our relatives, that our father was having health complications, but she didn't know how serious it was, which is why she hadn't bothered to visit sooner. She believed it wasn't appropriate to announce the engagement at that time, so she had kept it private. Now, however, she felt it was time to introduce him to the family, so she brought him along. He seemed like a nice guy, and I could tell he was well off financially. His clothes, watch, and shoes were all expensive. I was happy for my sister because it seemed like she had finally found the kind of guy she wanted, someone financially stable, who knew what he wanted in life, and had his future planned out. After talking to both of them, we learned that her fiancé, like her first boyfriend, was also the son of a wealthy man who owned a chain of fast food restaurants. But unlike her first boyfriend, this guy seemed serious about her, and it was clear they were truly in love. I was genuinely happy for her and remember congratulating them both. I never thought my father, or even my sister and her fiancé, would do what they did. But, after about 3 weeks of knowing him, my father suddenly decided it would be best to let them take over the business as well. One morning, he called me and asked me to come home because he wanted to talk about something. At the time, I was at work, as I had been the one managing everything ever since my father's health declined. I was essentially running the business, although he hadn't officially retired yet. I knew retirement was coming, and I was confident I would step up as CEO of our company. But that one day changed everything. Suddenly, my sister and her fiancé were in line to take over the business I had been managing for so long. When I arrived at my parents' house that day, my sister and her fiancé weren't there, but my parents were, and they looked grim. After some small talk, my dad finally delivered the crushing news. At first, I thought he was joking, but when I realized he was serious, I couldn't believe it. When I asked him why he would make such a decision after just 3 weeks of knowing this man, he said he had his reasons but refused to explain. After considerable arguing, he finally told me that the reason he was handing over the business to my sister and her fiancé, instead of me as promised, was because he believed they would be more capable than I am. To make matters worse, he said he thought this could be a welcome gift to them for rejoining the family, as they were about to start a new chapter by getting married in a couple of months. He believed this could be their wedding gift. I tried to convince him it was a terrible idea. No wedding gift should be as large as an entire business, just because the guy appeared wealthy. Besides, my father had always led me to believe I would inherit the business when he retired. I had built my entire life around this, and now, suddenly, he was taking it away from me to give to people who hadn't been part of our lives for the last 15 years. I tried to tell him that maybe he could make us partners in the business and attempted to bargain and negotiate with him because this was my future we were talking about. But my father was firm in his belief, saying that he was going to let them take over because he thought it would be in better hands. He believed that since my sister's fiancé's father had already built a successful business of his own, they would be able to expand our jewelry business twice as fast as I could. I begged him for just one chance, but he was not ready to listen to me, and I was heartbroken that day. I wasn't just upset because I was losing something so big, it was more about the fact that I had devoted 12 years of my life to this, only to get nothing in return. I hadn't even been able to earn my father's respect, because if he had respected the work and effort I put into the business, he wouldn't have pushed me out. That was the day I decided to cut all ties with my family because I had nothing left to say to them. I had expected my sister to at least fight for me, but she let me down as well. They gladly accepted their so-called wedding gift, which was my life's work. My sister had always known that I wanted to take over the family business once my dad retired. I had talked about it non-stop since I was 13, and I spent my whole life looking forward to it. So, it wasn't as if she didn't know that when she accepted the wedding gift, she was accepting my dreams and taking them as her own. She even made a post on social media thanking our parents for the gift and, along with it, announced her engagement. After that, no one from the family bothered to reach out to me, and I think that was the most hurtful part of all, the fact that they didn't even seem to care about me. The day I left my father's house, they stopped speaking to me, and I felt like I had been used. 12 years of my life had gone to waste. I was just thankful that I had enough savings to fall back on. For a couple of months, I could afford not to do anything and just focus on putting my life back together because I felt like everything had fallen apart. That was 8 months ago, and after that, I started therapy. I could feel myself spiraling into depression, and I knew I had to address it immediately, or I don't know what I would have done. Seeing all the posts my sister shared made me feel sick, so I had to block her. I also told my relatives that I was no longer in touch with my family and didn't want to hear anything about them. I literally requested them not to tell me anything, no matter how big it seemed, because I didn't want to know. They respected my wishes and kept everything from me. So, for the past couple of months, I had no idea that my dad's health had been steadily deteriorating, and my sister and her fiancé didn't seem to care. It wasn't until a week ago that I found out when I received a call from my dad. He told me he was in the hospital after suffering a cardiac arrest in the middle of the night and wanted me to come see him. I had blocked his number, so he had to use someone else's phone to call me. Honestly, I felt guilty about that, but then I remembered what he did to me 8 months ago, and that guilt faded. Still, once he called and told me he was suffering, I told him I would come see him right away. So, I dropped everything and rushed to the hospital. When I got there, my mom, Janice, and my dad, Gerald, were present, but to my surprise, neither Savannah or Landon were anywhere to be found. I found that strange because I assumed they were close, given they were running the family business. I couldn't help myself and asked about my sister and her fiancé as soon as I walked into the hospital room. My father, with great disappointment, told me that Savannah was too busy to come see him, and so was her fiancé. I was shocked because, having run the business for 12 years, I knew it was lucrative and mostly self-sustaining. Unless there was a major crisis, we never had to be at the workplace all day. At least, that's how it was when I was in charge. I can't say how things are now. When my dad told me they were too busy, I asked if they had come to see him at all since the heart attack. He told me they hadn't. He had called them, but they only replied by text, saying they were too busy and would visit once he was discharged. These details were shocking to me, and I could see that my father realized he had made a grave mistake by handing over the reins of the business to my sister and her fiancé. So, he told me that one of the main reasons he had called me was to apologize for what he had done. He said he felt incredibly guilty and regretful for pushing me out of the business, despite all the hard work and effort I had put in. Now, he wanted to make things right and invite me back into the family and the business. He told me about my sister and her fiancé not showing up at the hospital for him, and how he had realized they didn't care about him the way he had cared about them. He also mentioned that this wasn't even the first time they had refused to show up for him. Over the past few months, they had become disconnected. He explained that after he handed over the business to them, they started visiting him less and less. Before that, they would come by every other day to check on him, but once his health began deteriorating, they didn't bother to visit, always claiming they were too busy with work. He found this hard to believe because both he and I knew that no one is so busy they can't spare an hour from their day, especially since they lived just a few blocks away from my parents' house. He never confronted them about it, but now they had crossed a line, and my dad couldn't tolerate the disrespect anymore. He wanted to take back the company and give it to the person who truly deserved it. We discussed everything in the hospital room, and then he invited me to rejoin the business. I was overjoyed. He apologized for everything, and though I'm still not completely over it, I forgave him at that moment because, for me, nothing was more important than reclaiming what I deserved. And if that meant forgiving my father, I was willing to do it. The problem now is that he's had this conversation with my sister as well, telling her that he wants her to step away. He's finally realized that even though he has always cared for her, she has never been there for him, and he won't tolerate this level of disrespect any longer. He asked for the company back and was giving it to the person who deserved it, leaving them to figure things out on their own. Unsurprisingly, my sister is upset, and for some reason, she thinks I'm the one to blame. She called me this morning and really lashed out, accusing me of being a horrible person and saying she can't believe I would do something so cruel. I don't even understand why she's acting like this. I feel like there's something we don't know, but she's behaving as if she's lost everything, and it's all because of me. The truth is, I think it's her own fault for not visiting our dad in the hospital. I mean, a cardiac arrest is a serious issue, and she could have taken time off work to see him. She was the one being selfish, and now I'm getting what I deserved from the start. 8 months ago, she had no problem accepting a gift she knew she didn't deserve, so why should I feel guilty about claiming something that rightfully belongs to me? Anyway, she's really upset, and when I tried to console her, she hung up on me in the middle of my sentence. Now, I'm left wondering if I'm the bad guy because, every time something happens, I seem to take the fall for it. Honestly, I'm tired of this. Am I the a-hole for letting my father ask my sister and her fiancé to step out of the family business so I can take over? Update 1, thank you all so much for the responses to my post. I kind of knew I didn't deserve the backlash from my sister, but hearing it from all of you has reassured me even more. If even strangers, who know nothing about our lives, believe I deserve the business, then I have nothing more to say in my defense, nor do I think I need to. It's been a couple of days since my last conversation with my sister, and I haven't heard back from her yet. She hasn't blocked me, so that's a good sign, but I can't shake the feeling that there's more going on here than she's letting on. I don't think someone with a rich fiancé would be so upset about losing out on our business. I have a theory that maybe things aren't what they seem with her fiancé. Some of you had asked about this in the comment section of the original post, but I didn't mention it at the time because I didn't think it was relevant. However, now I believe it's important to address. I don't think my sister's fiancé and his family are doing well financially right now. From what I've heard, his dad's company has been facing loss after loss, and they haven't been able to recover for over a year. I suspect that sneaking into our family business was their way of securing a safety net, eventually hoping to take over. I still haven't figured out why exactly my sister reacted the way she did when she learned I was being asked to rejoin the family business while she was being asked to step aside. If her fiancé's family was as wealthy as she claimed, she shouldn't have been so devastated. Something just didn't add up, and I have a feeling she's going to come clean about it soon. Anyway, we're lucky that my father didn't sign any documents or officially hand over the business to my sister and her fiancé. If he had, we would have been in serious trouble. He's still the CEO, and they were only working under him in the role I used to have. He was training them to take over eventually, but now it doesn't seem like that's going to happen. I spoke to my father, and while he mentioned that my sister is very upset, he told me he can't afford to focus on that right now. His priority is to sign everything over to me so that I can take control of the business. He's already speaking with a lawyer to get the paperwork drawn up, and I'll be taking over as soon as possible, making it formal and official. Honestly, I'm really excited, and nothing, even my sister's dramatic outbursts, can dampen my mood right now. Update 2*Hi. It's been a couple of weeks since my last post, and I just wanted to let you all know that I am now officially the new CEO of my dad's jewelry business. The handover is complete, and I'm in charge. It feels amazing to finally say that. I always knew this day would come, but there were a few delays in the process because of my sister. Speaking of her, she's absolutely not happy about any of this, and I guess I can finally confirm my suspicions. My theory was right. She and her fiancé were trying to sneak their way into our family business and take over so they'd have something to fall back on when her fiancé's father inevitably let go of his company. It turns out, it was my sister who planted the idea of welcoming them back into the family by handing over the business to her fiancé in my father's mind, and unfortunately, my father fell for it. I learned all of this recently after reconnecting with my father. He admitted that he wasn't thinking straight at the time. He was swayed by the idea that someone from such an established business family would be better suited to manage everything than I was. His original plan had been to keep me in the same position I'd been working in, but when I told him I wasn't interested unless I could be the head of the company, he lost his temper. That led to these 8 months of misery for both of us. Thankfully, he came to his senses just in time, and we avoided a huge disaster because, as of now, my sister's fiancé and his father have zero credibility in the market. I had been hearing rumors about my sister's fiancé's father's business being on the verge of shutting down, but I didn't believe them because I figured my dad would reach out to me if something like that were happening. At the same time, my father assumed I would reach out to him if I had heard anything, so neither of us did, which, in hindsight, was pretty foolish. Anyway, my sister finally confessed what she was trying to do and set her ego aside to speak to me. She reached out a couple of days ago, just before it was finalized that I would become the CEO, and admitted that she and her fiancé desperately needed jobs. They aren't sure how much longer her fiancé's father's company can survive. Now she's asking me for help, and I told her I'd think about it. I don't have an issue with hiring them. It's just that I'll never be able to fully trust them again because I know what their original intentions were. That's what feels so strange to me right now. I do want to help my sister, but at the same time, how can I hire people I don't trust? Anyway, I told her I needed some time to think it over, and she has agreed to wait for now, but honestly, I'm not sure what I'm going to do. Update 3*. So, I've decided not to hire my sister and her fiancé. I know some people may think this makes me seem selfish, but the truth is, I can't trust them. When my dad offered them the chance to take over the company initially, they accepted it without hesitation, and they didn't bother to reach out to me for 8 months. They showed absolutely no compassion or empathy for anyone other than themselves, and I don't want people like that around me or working for me. So, with a heavy heart, I told my sister that I couldn't help her. Unsurprisingly, she didn't take the news well. She showed up at my office the other day and threw a tantrum, accusing me of being heartless and selfish. She even told me that she regretted ever letting me have the company back. I found that odd because she had no part in that decision. It was entirely my father's choice. When she took over, it wasn't my decision, and now that I'm in charge, it's not hers either. For her to act as if she had done me a huge favor was ridiculous. I would have tolerated most of her outburst, but that comment really irritated me. So, I told her she hadn't done me any favors, not then, and certainly not now. She never cared about me, so it was absurd for her to expect me to do the same for her. I asked her politely to leave, but she refused and kept screaming at me, completely undermining my authority. At that point, I decided to call the police to have her escorted out because I couldn't deal with that level of drama. I'm already busy with work, and I don't need that added stress. Once the cops arrived, she didn't have much to say and just left quietly. It's been a few days since then, and I haven't heard from her, so I assume she's going to leave us alone now. But even if she doesn't, I'm prepared to take further steps. If necessary, I'll get a restraining order against her.